Hi, welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, I'll be featuring the case of Richard Sharpe. So let's go ahead and find out more. Let's go ahead and dive on in. Richard Sharpe was born in 1954. Not a lot is known about Richard's early life from the research, but in 1973, Richard married his girlfriend, Karen, 3 months after graduating from Shelton High School in Connecticut. Shortly after, the couple had their first child, a daughter named Shannon. In 1976, according to court documents, Richard imprisoned Karen in their home for 48 straight hours and abused her. In Karen's affidavit, she stated, quote, "He accompanied me to the hospital, and while I was being treated, he whispered in my ear, 'I want you to die,'" end quote. In the early 1980s, according to Karen, Richard got so drunk one New Year's Eve, he beat her while the couple was driving home. She said of this incident, quote, "We were stopped at a hotel, but we were denied occupancy because I was covered in blood. As a result of this incident, I suffered from a broken nose, a concussion, 2 black eyes, and a split lip," end quote. In 1983, according to an affidavit from Shannon Sharpe, she became a victim of her father's physical abuse at the age of 10. She stated, quote, "He grabbed my neck and continually slammed my head against the wooden bed frame until I could no longer breathe. The next memory is my head hitting the stairs as he dragged me down the flight of stairs, screaming and battering me," end quote. In 1985, the Sharpe family moved to Boston, where Richard finished his studies at Harvard Medical School. In the early 1980s, Richard's abusive behavior became, well, really bizarre. According to his wife, one night, quote, "My husband and I went out to dinner with my family, and he drank to excess. When we arrived home with my family, my husband became belligerent, began parading around the house naked, and punched my brother Jamie," end quote. In 1995, Richard founded a company called ClickMed that he would later turn into Lace Hair, and that made him millions of dollars. Richard had now become a member of the Harvard Medical School faculty who ran several businesses outside of his medical practice, and he put his earnings into the stock market, earning him millions more. Richard was also affiliated now with both Addison Gilbert and Beverly Hospitals. He was also an instructor of dermatology at Harvard Medical School. Over the years, Richard had hundreds of patients on the Cape Ann area. He had become a prominent dermatologist, and the family now moved to Wenham, Massachusetts. February 2000, after 27 years of marriage, Richard and Karen were now in the midst of a divorce. Karen had issued a restraining order against Richard. Richard stood to lose several $1,000,000 in this divorce. July 14th, 2000, on this horrible night, Richard shot and killed his wife in the foyer of her Wenham home with a high-powered rifle. The couple had 2 young kids at this time, 5 and 7 years old, who were there at the time, as well as Karen's brother and a babysitter. Their 26-year-old daughter, Shannon, at this time, was not home. After the shooting, Richard left the scene, and a police search ensued. He was later found in New Hampshire about 30 hours later. A motel clerk at the Pineview Lodge recognized Richard's face from a television news report. He had registered for the motel room using his real name. Gloucester Police Lieutenant Michael McLeod remembers being there at the time of his arrest. Well, McLeod, now retired after serving as police chief, made this quote about the night Richard was arrested. Quote, "I remember that night in New Hampshire. He was strange that night. He showed no remorse. It was pouring buckets of rain that night, It was torrential. They evacuated as many people as they could from the motel and threw in the biggest can of tear gas I ever saw in my life. He came right out. They put him to the ground and took him away." End quote. McLeod sat with Richard at the Tufton Borough Police Department after the arrest, and he said, quote, "He said just a few syllables. He wasn't upset. He wasn't screaming or crying. It was like, okay, you got me," end quote, recalled McLeod. When Richard was being placed under arrest in New Hampshire, the police were shocked at the doctor's appearance because it appeared that he was developing breasts. July 16th, 2000. Richard, after his arrest, now drew national attention from this case. Photographs of him began to surface, but these photographs were of him wearing slinky dresses and fishnet stockings. Additionally, Karen's earlier affidavits now all became out in public. One of them stated that he stole her birth control pills in an effort to enlarge his breasts. July 21st, 2000, Richard was charged with murder and held without bail. At his trial, Richard testified that he began cross-dressing at a young age to escape his father's rage. Richard's family testified for the defense, stating that Richard was abused for years by his father. A defense psychiatrist said that Richard suffered from a half-dozen disorders, including depression and intermittent explosive disorder. This causes bursts of rage or aggression. The experts stated that alcohol would make them worse. They tried to claim that he was insane at the time of the murder of his wife, Karen. Prosecutors claimed that Richard faked symptoms of mental illness. They argued that he did not kill his wife, Karen, in a burst of rage, but planned the killing after she left him. The important testimony in the trial was from psychiatrists and other experts who stated that Richard was lucid and he could discern right from wrong when he shot his wife. It was said Richard was a smart doctor who helped patients, but also was a doctor who often unnerved patients who would go to the office visit for a specific skin or mole lesion, and then the patients would be asked to remove all their clothes. That's just odd. But those who knew him also saw his decline and saw his volatile relationship between him and his wife grow worse and worse. Quote, "Everybody was watching him go downhill. He was a successful businessman and doctor, and he was always walking a fine line of lunacy. People saw him losing more and more touch with reality as time went on. He started to get weirder and weirder," end quote. July 2001, a fellow inmate of Richard's accused Richard of offering him $1 million to help Richard escape. November 29th, 2001, Richard was convicted of first-degree murder in the shooting of his wife, Karen, and he was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict was read, Karen Sharpe's sister, Kathleen Lembo, who had since become the guardian of the two minor children named Alexandra and Michael, stood on the courthouse steps to describe her sister. Quote, "Karen Sharpe was a loving mother, the best sister anybody could have. She was a wonderful daughter and a friend," end quote. Shannon Sharpe, the oldest daughter, said to the Associated Press, quote, "It should be clear that I have no doubt in my mind that my father's actions are unforgivable," end quote. Shannon and the two minor children, again, the children were aged 6 and 8 at the time, sued their father for $100 million. The family's babysitter, who was home at the time of the shooting, brought a $5 million civil lawsuit against him, citing the trauma of witnessing this murder. In March 2002, Richard tried to hang himself in his cell, but was unsuccessful. August 2007, Richard was on trial for allegations that he approached another inmate for helping him wanting to kill the Essex County prosecutor, Robert Weiner, who brought the murder charge against him originally. Richard was ultimately acquitted of that charge. July 5th, 2009, Richard was found hanged by a bedsheet in his cell. He had taken his own life. That is the case of Dr. Richard Sharpe. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Danny After Dark. Do you have any questions or comments on the case? Leave it down below. Let's be interactive. Do you have a suggestion for a case that you'd like me to cover? Well, leave it down below. You may see it featured in an upcoming episode. Until next time, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us.